Hi everyone, I'm Chyill and welcome back to another detailed champion guide. Today I'll be talking about our newest champion, Jamila, the Shadowblade Assassin, and so please sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Jamila is a melee assassin DPS champion who excels in dealing very good burst damage to her enemies with her twin blades. Having said that though, her ability to deal those large instances of burst damage does rely a lot on her ability to get people to hit her counters and have good timing and positioning. This, coupled with the fact that she doesn't have a lot of reliable escape options, makes her a tough champion to play overall, and she is not beginner friendly at all. To compensate her lack of reliable escape options, she's got decent self-sustain and control, and so she does at least bring some utility to the team. She's also a ton of fun to play since her playstyle is very assassin-like. In short, she's strong for her burst damage and control, but she is easily punished when she makes mistakes since she lacks a little bit in escapes and is a very all-in type of champion. So yeah, that was just a brief summary of Jamila as a champion. Now I'll just quickly give a rundown on how this video is structured before I get into the meat of the guide. As with my older champion guides, I have split this guide up into 5 sections, and that is abilities, playstyle, Battlerites, loadouts, and team comps. I've included timestamps directly to each section in the description below, so feel free to jump directly to a certain section that you need if you wish. I'd like to point out that I do not have a gameplay tips section on my champion guides anymore, since I feel like some of the tips are quite repetitive from champion to champion, and so these little gameplay tips will instead pop up in the video when they are relevant, I suppose. And so yeah, with all that being said, let's begin. First off, abilities. Jamila's mouse 1 ability is Assassin's Cut, and this is her basic melee attack ability. It is a 4-part combo attack, and what it does is Jamila will do 3 quick stabs, each dealing 6 damage, before finishing the combo off with a heavy strike that deals 16 damage. Before engaging onto an enemy, Jamila can actually charge up the combo by doing 3 strikes first, and this will allow her to start off an engagement with a strong 16 damage strike. Doing this 3-hit combo before hitting an enemy which is incapped or petrified is preferable, since you will start off with a strong burst instead of hitting them multiple times with weak 6 damage attacks. Next up, Jamila's mouse 2 ability is Shuriken, and this is her main range poke ability. What it does is Jamila will throw a bouncing shuriken, kind of like Paloma's Woof, and this shuriken will bounce from target to target, dealing 18, 12, and 6 damage to each target in order. The shuriken also inflicts a 30% snare for 1.5 seconds, so it's pretty good for peeling and chasing enemies down as well. Just be careful that the bounce range for this ability isn't as long as Paloma's Woof, and the enemies have to be very close to each other for the shuriken to bounce. Plus, the initial range of the ability isn't very long as well, so you will have to be relatively close to the enemies to use it effectively. When it comes to trying to take the AWP, this ability is actually one of the better ways for you to try to take the AWP, since the 18 damage range burst gives you a pretty decent chance at sniping AWPs from people. Moving on, Jamila's spacebar ability is Elusive Strike, and this is her main iframe and movement ability. What it does is Jamila can dash forward, dealing 8 to 18 damage to all enemies along the way while being invulnerable depending on the charge up time. The longer she charges up the dash, the more damage it deals, and the further the dash goes. If Jamila hits a wall while dashing, she will stop for a while before triggering another wall dash that can incapacitate people along the dash path for 2 seconds. Even though the wall dash can incapacitate multiple people, and it seems like it is an area of effect attack just like the initial dash, be careful that the wall dash can actually trigger counters even though you will still be invulnerable while dashing. Because this ability is your only reliable iframe, occasionally you won't have time to charge up your spacebar, and so you might have to do a short dash sometimes just to avoid a hard-hitting ability. Next up, Jamila's Q ability is Shadow Dance, and this is her counter ability, which also happens to be the main source of her burst damage. What it does is Jamila will attempt to counter the next melee or projectile attack, and when successful, she will turn invisible and gain 35% movement speed for 2.5 seconds, while also gaining immaterial for the first 0.5 seconds. This Shadow Dance ability also makes her next mouse 1 attack, while invisible, become Shadow Slice, which deals 14 damage and inflict the Phantom Cut debuff onto the target. This Phantom Cut debuff causes the target to take 22 damage after a 2-second delay, and so this means that the counter alone would have done 36 damage to a single target if you managed to pull off the attack within the invisibility duration. That is a pretty massive amount of burst damage, so definitely try to make sure you can proc your counter to unleash Jamila's potential. Be careful not to accidentally use other abilities while invisible, since that removes your invisibility and hence the large burst damage potential as well. As you can see, the 0.5 seconds immaterial is her only other iframe outside of her spacebar ability, and her counter ability is tied to her offensive capability. She doesn't have a lot of reliable escapes for this reason, unfortunately. Moving on, Jamila's E ability is Hook Shot, and this is another one of her movement or engagement abilities. What it does is Jamila will throw a hook forward that deals 6 damage to the target it hits, and it also pulls Jamila and the target together. After colliding, Jamila deals another 8 damage to the target, and she can then continue moving and attacking as normal. If you wish, hookshot can be used on a wall to pull Jamila to the wall as well, kind of like Shifu's javelins. The difference is Jamila isn't actually invulnerable while flying, whether it be the wall or to the enemy, and so you do have to be careful not to pull yourself over area of effect abilities or incoming enemy projectiles. And so those were all of Jamila's abilities that doesn't require energy. Now let us move on to those which do. First off, Jamila's R ability is Deadly Blow, and this is another one of Jamila's big burst damage abilities. What it does is Jamila will wind up her blades and strike in front of her with both blades. The target in front of her takes 22 damage from this attack, gets stunned for 0.25 seconds, and Jamila also heals for 22 health. The stun duration is pretty low, and you can think of this stun as more of an interrupt rather than a proper stun or CC, but the big thing about this ability is really just the big burst damage and heal, since it creates a large health differential between Jamila and the target, since you do a big heal to yourself as well. Just be careful of the long cast time of 0.8 seconds, since people have a lot of time to react to the ability and either escape or interrupt the ability before you can cast it. The good thing about the attack being so obvious is also that you can bait out counters or escape with it, but since you have to be within melee range to do it, it is only occasionally useful, unlike baiting abilities with strong range attacks. Moving on, Jamila's first EX ability is a shift right click ability, Blood Kunai. What it does for 25 energy is Jamila will throw a kunai at the target, dealing 8 damage and inflicting the weaken debuff as well. Hitting an enemy also causes the kunai to bounce to a nearby ally, or if there's no nearby ally, it will bounce back to Jamila. This bounced kunai hit actually heals the ally or Jamila for 16 health, so this ability is a fantastic trading ability or even peeling ability, since you can help your ally out with the heals and weaken debuff on the enemy. The weaken factor is 50% and it lasts for 2 seconds, so pretty much a standard weaken debuff found in other champions as well. Next up, Jamila's second EX ability is a shift spacebar ability, Phantom Strike. What it does for 25 energy is kind of similar to a normal spacebar ability. The difference is that there is no need for a charge up, and Jamila will dash forward a fixed distance immediately, followed by a dash back towards the starting position. The outward dash deals 12 damage to all enemies in its path, while inflicting a 1.5 seconds fading snare without triggering counters, and the returning dash incapacitates all enemies along its path, but this returning dash does trigger counters just like the normal spacebar ability. If Jamila hits a wall during the outward dash, she can do a wall dash just like in the normal spacebar ability, and the rest of the ability is similar to the normal spacebar. The good thing about the EX version of this ability is the immediate dash, since it provides an iframe immediately as opposed to having to charge up the spacebar ability, so you might want to use this ability every so often, especially in tight situations. Finally, Jamila's ultimate ability on the F key is Stalking Phantom, and what it does is Jamila will summon a phantom that dashes forward, dealing 18 damage and stopping behind the first enemy it hits. Upon arrival at the location, the phantom will chase and strike all enemies near to the target in bursts of 18 damage up to 3 times during its duration. The phantom can chase enemies who are invisible, but it will stop chasing an enemy if they use a jump or escape ability, which makes them invulnerable for a short while. The 18 damage bursts come in tiny parts of 3, and every single one of these 3 damage hits procs counters, so do be careful of that. You want to make sure the enemy has used up all of their counters or escapes first before using this ultimate ability, otherwise enemies will very easily escape or easily proc their counter. In my opinion, the ultimate ability is quite lackluster most of the time, and it is quite hard to find a good use for it, except in rare and niche situations. I feel like the energy is best used for her other abilities that require energy, especially her EX Mouse 2 and R abilities, and occasionally her EX Space ability. Jamila can be pretty weak without any energy, and so not having any energy left over after using her ultimate ability can be quite dangerous sometimes, so do be careful of that. And so yeah, that's about it for Jamila's abilities. Let us now move on and talk a little bit about her playstyle. Jamila's playstyle is, I think, a sort of passive-aggressive one. You'll mostly be looking for opportunities to strike when your abilities are all ready, and just mostly hanging back and staying safe while they are recharging. When you spot an opportunity, you'll typically want to gap close and engage either with mouse 2 or E, and then try to get the enemy to hit your counter. Using your mouse 2 to gap close means that you have your E ability as an extra escape option or chasing option, so I typically recommend using mouse 2 to initiate a fight. Additionally, it should be easier to time your counter and get your enemy to hit it while you're walking toward your enemy after using your mouse 2, so this should help make your counters more consistent as well. After using Shadow Slice to inflict the Phantom Cut debuff onto an enemy, the typical follow-up would be to use R to stun the enemy to reduce the likelihood of them avoiding the 22 damage burst by using an iframe. Pulling off this counter into R combo deals a massive amount of burst damage to a single target, and this is your bread and butter damage combo, if it is possible to pull it off without committing too much health. Your spacebar ability will typically be saved for escaping or chasing further depending on the situation, or if you have a specific Battlerites, which we will get into later, it might be used as part of an all-in combo that you may or may not want to use depending on the situation. Occasionally, if instead you've been engaged on, you can potentially use your spacebar first as a counter engagement tool, since you can in-cap someone with a wall dash. Successfully in-capping enemies this way stops their offensive push and opens up a potential retaliation. A good follow-up onto the in-cap target would be to use your R onto them, for example. If your R is not ready, or you don't have enough energy, then just simply using your mouse 2 for the good 18 damage burst, followed by more mouse 1s, is pretty good as well. If you missed your in-cap, then a good option would be to use your EX mouse 2 and start trading hits with the enemy while they're weakened. If the enemies start retreating, then your E ability should be ready as a chasing tool if needed, but definitely remember to not overextend, since most of your abilities are probably still on cooldown at this point. About Jamila's EX space, you can't really use it for mobility as you would your normal spacebar ability unless you're close to a wall, and so it will mostly be a tool you use when you're trying to do a quick in-cap onto enemies while you're far away from a wall. Alternatively, it can also be used for a quick 12 damage to finish enemies off. Once again, your R is a good follow-up onto an in-cap target if you did successfully hard CC someone. Finally, onto Jamila's ult. As usual, it is another one of those where you'll want to wait until the enemy has used up their cooldowns before you use your ultimate ability onto them for maximum effect. It is pretty weak if you don't set it up, and so I definitely don't recommend using it until you do set it up, unless you are perhaps really desperate because the enemy is really close to dying and you're still in a relatively safe position. And so yeah, that's about it for Jamila's playstyle. Now let us move on to Jamila's Battlerites options and loadouts. Because there are so many Battlerites currently and it will take me a long while to go through and describe all of them one by one, I'll just display them here, and if you wish you can go ahead and pause the video to slowly read through them before continuing with the video. And so pause now to read through the first half, and now again for the second half. Okay, now that we've read all of them, let's continue. First off, I think that there are a couple of Battlerites that are really very good, and you should heavily consider having them in your build most of the time. They're by no means a must pick 100% of the time, but it's probably something quite close to that I feel. These Battlerites are Taste of Blood and to a lesser extent Deep Wounds. The reason why I think Taste of Blood is a must pick Battlerites all the time is because it is your most consistent form of self-sustain. The self-sustain from Jamila's R and EX Mouse 2 isn't consistent enough since they both cost energy, and so Taste of Blood is extremely useful for keeping your health as high as possible. Every time you use your mouse 2 and you hit someone with your shuriken, you should be able to heal yourself up by at least 8 HP. Just gotta be careful not to let your shuriken fly into a wall while it is on its way back, since you actually don't get your heals if you let it hit a wall. While Deep Wounds may seem quite inconsequential, the 1.5 second increased snare duration actually means that the snare duration is doubled and can be quite significant sometimes. As I said earlier, you sometimes want to engage with your mouse 2 and walk into the fight, and so this 3 seconds total snare duration helps a lot for doing that. So yeah, for the remaining 3 Battlerites slots, you can kind of mix and match what you need depending on the map, team composition, and personal playstyle. Depending on which map you're playing in, there are a couple of Battlerites that can be pretty good and is quite worth picking. In larger maps, Push Off, Agile Shadows, and Firing Mechanism increase a lot in value as Battlerites in my opinion. The increased range you get from Push Off makes it a lot easier to reach walls and do the wall dash for in-caps, and that's why it's good in larger maps to catch people off with your in-caps. Agile Shadows pretty much gives your Jamila the ability to all-in and almost guarantee your Shadow Slice to hit somebody, but this does mean using your 2 most important defensive abilities to commit to an attack, and that is why it can be quite risky to play this way. If you have a support in your team to heal up some of the damage you'll probably take when playing this way, then maybe it could work and the burst damage is justified, but then again, you'll still have to make sure that you don't use the combo too recklessly, otherwise you might be punished too harshly. The increase in range for your E that you get with Firing Mechanism is a pretty good bonus as well in larger maps, since you get to be a bit more mobile as Jamila, or you can even engage onto enemies from further away. In smaller maps, Battlerites like Quick Strike is pretty good since you are more likely to hit walls with the hook shot, even though the short dash strike is only 16 damage, which is 2 damage more than the 14 that you usually deal when you hit someone with your E. The little dash that you do can sometimes be useful to deal area of effect damage, or like use it for extra mobility as well, so it does have its uses. If you need more damage, Phantom Blades and Go for the Throat are some pretty good Battlerites to have. Phantom Blades makes your Phantom Cut deal 8 more damage, and so if you feel like you can make use of your counter and the Shadow Slice after that properly, then Phantom Blades is a pretty good option for battle burst damage basically. Go for the Throat is a good Battlerites overall if you can consistently make good use of your R. The cooldown reduction means you can make use of your R quite a bit more often, resulting in more damage, but the stun duration increase also lets you do a little bit more damage to the enemies before they can move again, which can often be useful. If you're looking for more control, then Cripple and Momentum Strike are some good options to have. Cripple makes your spacebar snare people and incapacitate people for longer, and so it is very useful when coupled with push off in 3 vs 3 matches. 2 incapacitate people and combo into them with your team. Momentum Strike is one of my personal favourite Battlerites as well, since the root lets you pull off 2 to 3 hits during the time the enemy is rooted, and it makes your punish on the enemy a lot stronger. Not to mention, you also add 3 damage to your E ability when you hit someone, and it actually works with Quick Strike as well if you took that Battleright. If you feel you need more survivability or a better ability to trade, then Drawing Blood and Inspiration could be pretty good. Drawing Blood's heal is pretty significant, but of course it depends on you proccing your counter, and so it is only really useful when you know you can consistently get people to hit your counter. You also still have to get the Shadow Slice off just to get the healing, so weigh out whether or not you're likely to get this healing based on the enemy team composition. Inspiration is pretty good overall, since the extra energy gain you get is useful in general. Being able to use your EX Mouse tool and arm more often due to the increased energy gains results in better survivability and ability to trade, and so I think it is really good in matchups where you'll be trading hits with your enemy very often. The Deadly Star and Blade Sword Battlerites are kind of interesting since their benefits are kind of hard to make use of. The bounce range of your mouse tool ability is really short, and so it is hard to get the full value out of Deadly Star most of the time. Unless you're up against a comp that stacks up together a lot, you mostly only get a single hit off with your shuriken, and so you usually only get the 2 damage bonus, which is hardly worth it to me. Unless of course if you're trying to snipe the orb with a 20 damage shuriken, then I guess it can be pretty useful. On to Blade Sword, the radius of this Blade Sword effect is actually very small, and so it is only really useful if you think that all the melee enemies will be stacked up when you use your counter, or you can force enemies to proc your counter while you're in melee range with them. Countering range attacks from far away mostly makes this Battleright obsolete, and I feel like it is more often that you'll be countering attacks from afar, since most comps will have at least 1 or 2 ranged champions. But having said that, it does still have a place in some matches I suppose. The remaining Battlerites, that is Roundhouse Kick and Lurking Phantom, are mostly quite unnecessary I think. I suppose Roundhouse Kick could be useful as a peeling tool, but it feels really awkward to use most of the time, and it is often wasted to me since people are out of range a lot of the time, unless you have incapped them. Jamila's ultimate is already pretty terrible to use, and so I hardly use it. Lurking Phantom only gives the ultimate ability a little incapacitate when bounced off a wall, which is hard enough to do in a lot of situations to me, and the incap will probably be broken really soon by the Phantom anyways, so I don't think it is worth it to pick up if at all. So yeah, those were my thoughts on most of the Battlerites for Jamila. Like I mentioned in my beginner tips video, I think you'll want to at least give a bit of thought about what Battlerites you're using before each round, since that is a good way of understanding the champion more, and it will help with making sure you learn what are the best situations to use which rights and so on. But in case you want to just quickly take a loadout and jump straight into a game, here are some loadouts that I use. To start off, here's the standard build I take most of the time. As I mentioned earlier, I take Taste of Blood and Deep Wounds almost all of the time, so here they are. Mostly for a little bit of control and sustain to help you out a bit when trying to engage onto enemies. I wouldn't really recommend Agile Shadow if you're really trying hard to win because of how all-in the Battleright is, but I have the Agile Shadow Battleright in my build because I find it quite fun to all-in every once in a while, and I try to sort of just rely on dodging abilities to stay alive after going all-in. If you have a support teammate that can enable this, like Xander or Paloma, since they can pretty much just portal or other side you out, then this Agile Shadow's Battleright could be okay even in proper games. Since most maps are pretty big for Jamila's spacebar range, I like to have push off to make my incaps a little bit more consistent. Momentum Strike is good in general for me to punish vulnerable enemies as well, and that's why I like taking it most of the time. If you need other Battlerites and you want to swap out some of the Battlerites in the build, then I'll typically swap out Agile Shadows and then push off for whatever Battleright you may need. Whether it be go for the throat for more control, inspiration for more energy gain, quick strike in smaller maps or whatever. And so yeah, that's about it on Jamila's Battlerites and loadouts. That was a fairly lengthy part, but we'll now move on to champions that synergize with Jamila before we finish the guide off with some final notes on Jamila. On team compositions, I find that Jamila synergizes well with champions that can enable her ability to deal burst damage, whether it be support champions who help keep her topped up and save her when she's in bad positions, or other DPS champions who can lock down enemies for Jamila to pull off some easy burst combos. I think pairing up with someone like Croak or Iva who can help you to lock down a single target, or support champions like Paloma, Xander or Lucy who also enable you to engage and fight safely can be a pretty good idea, and so you can try to start from there when making a viable team composition. And so yeah, in short, I think that Jamila is really fun to play, even though she can be a bit tough to learn. Her burst damage combos are incredibly satisfying to pull off, and it feels even better when you're able to work with your team to deal massive amounts of burst damage. Jamila seems pretty okay in 2s with a synergistic teammate, but I think she might have some slight issues in 3 vs 3s due to her lack of mobility and iframes and range pressure. That said though, I think if she plays with a team and plays it smartly, incap the right people at the right times, pressure and burst down vulnerable enemies after they've used their cooldowns, she can still do quite a decent amount of work. And so yeah, that's about it for my Jamila guide. I hope you guys found it useful. The next guide coming up is on Croak, and so if you guys would like to vote on which champion guide you'd like me to update next after Croak's guide, go ahead and click on the I button at the top right now. That's about it for this video, and I hope you enjoyed watching this video as well. If you did, please subscribe to the channel, leave a like, leave any questions or thoughts in the comment section below, share this video with your friends, and you can check out my other videos too if you haven't already. I stream 3 days a week now on Twitch, so do check me out at twitch.tv/Chyill as well if you're into watching people play Battlerite live. Thank you very much for watching my video, and until next time guys, have a great day, keep gaming, stay chill, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.